Boker Tov, a good Nisru Chag. Today's daf is daf Tesvav and Sota, as we learned for Shlemah for Akiva ben Chai Rochel. From the fourth line on the page. So the Mishnah had talked about the differences, not just the Mishnah, but the Gemara, following the differences between the Bryce that was brought down, that what's the difference here between this carbon mincha that the Sota must bring versus other Kabbalas mincha. So first he talked to in general about Kabbalas mincha. Kabbalas mincha is a flower offering. We learn in Kachim, of course, it's all Mesechlet called Menachos. And carbon mincha is one of the four kinds of Kachim. You have an Ola, Chatos, Asham. Ola, of course, is totally burnt, can't be eaten by anybody. Chatos and Asham are eaten by the Kohanim, the male Kohanim. And the mincha is also eaten by Kohanim, unless it's a mincha brought by a Kohen himself. Then it's totally burnt. But the regular mincha that a person has to bring, carbon mincha, when do you bring a carbon mincha? For example, the Sota brings a carbon mincha, right? Or there's a carbon mincha that we brought on the second day of Pesach, which is called the carbon, the Omer. And the Omer and the mincha of the Sota have a similarity that they're brought both from barley, not from wheat. And we're going to talk about the other differences that between the karbanos mincha. But in general, carbon mincha is eaten by the kohanim, meaning after the komets, the fistful is taken and burnt on the mizbech, it's eaten by the kohanim. So the Gemara says, minolan. How do we have carbon komets? If you once you're mocked with the komets, and it's remember the komets is the equivalent of shchita, right? You put the kohen puts his hand in with that fist, that kind of fist like this. And he takes the mincha, he takes that fistful, and he puts it in a klisharis. That's like Kabbalah of the dam. Remember, shchita Kabbalah lacha zrika. Takes it to the mizbech. That's so lacha, and then he burns it on the mizbech, which is the equivalent of sprinkling the dam of an animal on the mizbech. So here, the karva comes once the fistful is burnt on the mizbech, the equivalent of dam. Then, just like what do you do with the chatas or an asham, once you sprinkle the dam, then the meat can be eaten by the kohanim. The same thing over here too. Once you burnt the komets on the mizbeach, the rest of the mincha of the flour offering can be eaten by the kohanim. Minon, how do we know that that's at that point it can be eaten? It says the kohen burns this remembrance, this offering of remembrance. Whatever's left over goes to our sons. Karva komets, once the komets has been offered, the market is the What do you mean? At what point can they eat it? We said once it's burned on the mizbeach, then the kohen can eat it. But at what point does the whole thing have to be burnt, or just the beginning of the burning? The itmar. So we said market is each one holds a different sheet. The itmar we learned komets. Once you take the fistful and burn on the mizbech, at what point is it matu, the leftover part of the mincha, be eaten? Or from the point when the fire has grabbed hold of the fistful. Doesn't mean that it's totally burned, just mean that it started burning. Once most of it has been burned. So there's a machlokas there, but once it's totally burned, certainly the kohanim can eat it. We're showing now, once the kohanim are allowed to eat it, they could eat it basically any way they want, not totally anyway. We just finished Pesach, and we'll see you can't make it into chametz, but you could put some wine in there, shemen, tvash. If you want to put honey in there, you can do it at my time. Our pasuk says, "L'mashcha kohanim," they are the priests and the holy people of our nation, and they are given that task, l'mashcha, for anointing, meaning for greatness, l'gedula. It's for eminence, for greatness. They are put on a high level. The way kings eat it. They don't just eat it plain. They don't eat plain flour. They mix in oil, make pita out of it, whatever they want. Yayin, bash, they can do that. Ain't a sunnah melchametz. The only thing I can't do is turn it to chametz. Lo seafech chametz. You can't bake any karban mincha into chametz. Chelkam, even a share of it. Rav Shapiro chelkam, even part of it. Can't even take part of it and make it into chametz. You're not allowed to turn the mincha to chametz. The only kind of carbon mincha which can be chametz is the shtei alechem on Shavuos, which we're going to have in 6 weeks. The shtei alechem and 10 out of the 40 loaves that are accompanied the carbon tota. Remember, there's 40 loaves of small loaves like small lachmaniot that are brought with the carbon tota. 30 are matzah or not chametz, and 10 are chametz. Those are the only two kinds of carbon mincha that can be brought as chametz. But a regular mincha is totally totally chametz free, just like the lechem apanim. Lechem apanim, we think of the 12 loaves. It's all matzah. It's not chametz. But they gebrachs, yeah. They could eat. The gebrachs they could eat. They don't have. It's not chametz. Not chametz. Gebrachs not chametz. Right? It made sure. We have the problem with gebrachs today, but they didn't have the problem. They just made sure when they made it that there was no chametz. All right, kol menachos to unas shem levona. Now it said in the Bryce, it said we started this whole thing by saying, "What do you mean?" The whole thing was brought down to ask a kasha on yesterday's daf. We said all these things are brought down and done, and then it said Ktani Mia somewhere, right? Ktani Mia b'kaltzah shekes. The question was brought about the clay kesef, the clay zov. Is that clay shores? Why did you say clay shores? It says kiltos or kesef means that's roy. So it brought down that whole price yesterday, and it said all menachos are brought with shem and levona. All menachos have oil and spices. I bet you minchas chote. What do you mean? This price is not exactly clear. It said all other ones have shem and levona, as opposed to the carbon of the sota woman, which is free of those, doesn't have shem and levona. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? All other minchas have shem and levona. V'ika minchas chote. What about the mincha of a sinner? If a particular some sins that if the sinner cannot afford a regular animal, he can bring birds, a couple of birds. If he can't afford the birds, he brings a flower offering, like the cheapest of them all. But that has no shem levana. You're not supposed to put any oil or frankincense spices on them. So why do you say all other minchas except for sota? It sounds like all other minchas except for sota have shem levana. This one also doesn't have shem and levana, minchas chote, the mincha of a regular sinner. This is what he means to say. All minchas, the Bryce reads is not exactly clear. Here he clarifies it. All the menachos require shem and levona, oil and spices. Ubos menachita normally come with wheat. Remember, I said that there's only two that come from barley: this mincha sota and the mincha omer. We'll see. But normally they all have shem and levona. They all come from wheat. Ubos they come from fine flour. Minchas chote is different. Even doesn't require shem like we just pointed out, but at least bas menachitin or basos, it comes from fine flour made from wheat. So that's what we mean to say that as we're getting towards that the mincha of the sota is different than all the other ones. All the other ones usually have three requirements: shem levona, chitin, and solas. Okay. Minchas chote doesn't have shem levona. We'll see why, but it still has wheat, and it comes from fine flour of wheat. Minchas omer, even though as I said, it comes from barley, but tunasham it still needs. It's a nice offering for the tzibur. You bring shem and levona with it. It comes with oil and spices. Uba geres, and it also comes from the fine flour made of barley. You know, that's what we call soles is usually refers to wheat, fine flour made from wheat, sifted 13 times. Well, if you take the same thing with barley, that's called geras, the fine flour of barley. The zoo, Eina Tuna Loshem Levona. This one, right, and this one, the zoo, meaning the mincha of the sota, doesn't have any of these qualities, meaning Lo Tuna Shem Levona, it doesn't have oil and spices. It comes from barley, which is like a cheaper, more of an animal food, whereas most breads are made from wheat, and barley is usually turned into animal fodder, animal food. Uba kemach, and it comes with coarse flour. Comes from coarse flour. It does not fine flour. Not fine flour of even of the barley. It's not geras. So that's the point, that the mincha of the sota is more of a less choice kind of a food. It's made very simple, coarse. No oil, no spices, comes from barley, and it's not even made fine flour, not from fine flour. Time of Shimon. Shimon's like this. The mincha of a sinner should require shem levana too. After all, he has to pay for it, right? He has to bring the. Why should he get off from the oil and the incense? Let him pay for that too.
What do you mean by sin?
A person who made a sin, let's say he came into the base of Mikdash b'shogeg. Right, there's a certain. I think it's midbar hay when it brings down certain things that require olav yard. He came in, right? Yeah. So this is the chatos that he brings. The chatos is normally an animal, but there are certain most sins. Let's say you ate chayla by mistake. That's the classic chatos. You ate chayla by mistake. So you have to bring an animal. There's no choice about that. You go beg, borrow, or steal. You got to bring an animal which is a sira or a kisba, a female goat or a sheep, lamb, and you bring that as a carbon. But there are certain sinners that, like I think, like I mentioned, Tumas Mikdash, if you came into the base of Mikdash while you were tamei by mistake, you didn't realize it, you didn't know it was base of Mikdash, you forgot you were tamei, or let's say you swore falsely. Certain cases there brought down that the sin there is the requirement is a carbon olivio. If you can't afford the animal, you bring a couple of birds. You can't afford the birds, you can bring this flour. If you bring this flour offering, doesn't require shemen or labona, right? We want to make it simple. So so the question is why make it simple? Why should he get off scot-free? It's bad enough that he can't bring an animal or a couple of birds. Require oil and spices. Why should the sinner get off free? Why should he gain by it? I don't have to pay for the oil and the spices. Good, I'll save that money. Why should he get off? Why doesn't it require oil and spices? We don't want it to be a superior carbon of superior quality. We want it to be a simpler, more plain, mundane carbon, because he's a sinner, so it's fitting for him to bring a mundane carbon. It shouldn't be like he's bringing a nice carbon. A regular chatos, that's what we call, classes called chatos chaylev. That's the classic case of you ate chaylev by mistake, you bring a chatos for that. So, but it could be other chatos also, other sins that you did that require a chatos. Shetei chatos chaylev tuna nesachim, that should require libations, and it doesn't. Why should he get off not having to pay for the libations? Why doesn't it require the mincha not the mincha, the chatas, the animal, that doesn't require libations with it? Most karbanos require libations, wine and oil. Why doesn't it? Shlei karbanim order again. So we don't want his carbon to be a nicer, more glorified, a superior quality carbon. What about the chatas of a mitzora or his asham? They require a sacham, because those don't come for a sin. In other words, a mitzora, the chatas that a mitzora brings, what do we say now? A leper, or what was the person with lesions, whatever it was. There's no good translation for mitzora. It's a spirit. It's got physical manifestations, but it's a spiritual kind of a disease. And the chatas that in the asham that he brings do require a sacham because they don't come for a sin. What do you mean they don't come for sin? Famous line, Al Shivat Barm Nagoim Bon. These Nagoim plagues, Ritzas, comes for 7 things. One of them is Lashon Hara. So it is a sin. It comes for different things that he's done. So it is for sins. The pain and the suffering and the shame of the disease itself, that atones for his sin, whatever sin he had. Kimaisi carbon, the carbon is simply Shturi Bekachim Rubikimaisi. It's coming simply to allow him to eat kachim. It's coming to purify him. It's not really coming for the sin. The atonement is the pain and suffering and shame of the disease itself. And this is coming to simply to purify him. So for the purification, it's not for the carbon is not for atonement. It's not for sin. Therefore, it requires libations. The Gemara Elamayat Chatas Nazir. We just finished learning Nazir. When a Nazir finishes his normal 30-day period of Nazirus, not when he became Tamei in middle, but his normal period of Nazirus, he finishes, he brings a Chatas Ol and Shlamim. So that Chatas should also, the Chatas of the Nazir, Teheinim, so should require Nesachim, that doesn't come based on a sin. He took upon himself Nazirus. Why is it a sin? The answer is Savalik Kappa, the famous sheet of Lazar Kappa, the Amr Nazir Nami Choteu. He's a Chote because God said we should enjoy things, we should enjoy wine, make a burpig often. And he said, no, I'm going to do that. That's also considered, in other words, it's not enough what the Torah gave him. We have enough Yisurim, right? 365 Lavan, 248 Mitzvah Say. You want to add on more and prohibit yourself from wine and grapes, etc. That's not something that's proper. That's considered a sin, according to Blazer Akapa. Tosfos brings down that even Rav Shimon also holds of that. And you will see, and I was asking like in a different way. So what about the ones who don't like Rav Blazer Akapa? So then they should, then that should have nesachim according to them. What do you say? The answer is that most do hold like Rav Elazar Kop. In fact, Rav Shimon himself, seems to say, he himself says that it's considered a sin. So the answer is it's brought down like Rav Elazar Kop because Rav Elazar Kop was the famous one who said that. Several times when we quoted the idea that a person who's a sinner, a person who steps off the Naziris, unless he's a Nazir like that famous guy in the South. You remember, except the South, that he said he saw he was beautiful. He saw himself in his reflection in the water, and he thought that he was so handsome that was going to lead him to do sins. And because of that, he says, I swear I'm going to take off Naziris and cut off my hair, etc. I'm going to do all that. So he did it l'shem shemayim. But most Nazirim, maybe today most Nazirim would, but sometimes a Nazir just because he takes it upon himself. And for ulterior road, it's not really l'shem shemayim. So most Nazirim in Echanami are sinners, and therefore his carbon chatas does not require nesachim.
So the mint of Sota is dry?
It's dry.
It's dry?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No shem levona. No, right, correct. So Gamliel said in the Mishnah, right? Was Gamliel in the Mishnah or in the Gemara? It was in the Gemara. What did Gamliel say? He gave it a reason, and he said, and he explained to him. He says, because it's a strange thing, is he says from Gamliel Omer. Where do we have Gamliel Omer? It's at the end of the Mishnah, fourth line of the Mishnah. We said the Mishnah said that you brought the Hayomi. Haya is going on the husband, right? The husband brings the carbon mincha on behalf of his wife. He's one who has to take it. Remember, forget we had. If there's no husband, there's no sota, right? There's no if the husband dies or he doesn't want to take her to, doesn't want to bring the Beis Mikdash. If he doesn't want to do it, it doesn't happen. So he brings the carbon mincha, and he brings it. We said in a cheap, basket, and then put it on her hand so that she should tie her out. Maybe she would be moda, whatever. We do all these things, and it says all minchas require shem lebona. This one doesn't require shem lebona. All minchas come from wheat. This comes from sorrow. Not all, of course. We said there's also exception. Carbon omer. There's some but it comes with fine sorrow and fine sifted barley, and this comes from coarse. From Gamliel Omer, Gamliel says kshem shemasem masabem kafrona. What do you mean Gamliel Omer? It should say Omer of Gamliel. Who's he arguing with? Usually, when you say Rav Gamliel Omer, when a sheet one front Abaya says this, Rav Omer that. If it's Amar Rava, that's like a new thing. He's just saying something. If it's Rava Amar, he's arguing with the one before. So Gamliel, who is he arguing with? Gamliel Omer, just like her masim, just like her actions are those of an animal. What sense are they of an animal? An animal is not devoted to a monogamous relationship with one other animal. They're studied all over the place, right? Whatever they do, they're just like her aunt, just like her ma'a said that she did if she committed adultery was a masmema. So her carbon is also the carbon of an animal, meaning comes from barley. But again, the question over here is, what do you mean Rav Gamliel Omer? Why it should be Amar Gamliel? He's just adding a nice thing. Who is he arguing with? Gamliel Omer says the Gemara. It's the Gemara now answered that. Tanya the Bryce says Amar Gamliel Chum. Gamliel said the Chumim. Sofrim, you scribes, Tamid Chum, Anichuli, Ba'adrashena, and I'll explain it. In other words, I'll explain it. I'll explain it. Chomer here means like a metaphor, an allegory. I'll explain it with an example. Rashi brings down that the Chomer here he's talking about is like a fastener. I liken it to it's just like two parts of a shirt that bring together. Remember, in America, you used to see it more where people had a talus and they had those two clips. Yeah. Button. Yeah. Button. But what is that? It doesn't mean a button in a simple button. It means like the clasp, the tie. Remember those guys who have the talus and they you have one? Huh? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. You use it on Shabbat? You use it? Oh, see. My father. There's an emotional reason for it. Usually older people have. You've seen it, Older. So that's what he says. It's really like it ties two ends of could be any garment. So we use it as a towel. That's what I've seen. Or it could be a woman's clasp that ties two ends of it together, holds it together. So he says, I'm going to put it together. And that's what he says. A button. This is Baruch Hashem. Tanya Amar Gamliel Sofrim Anichuli Adarshana. I'll give you the reason. In other words, the question is, why is Gamliel listed as a retort? Gamliel Omer, as if he's retorting. The answer is he's retorting to the Chum. What does he mean? The Shammai, Rav Meir, you're Rav Meir, the Tanakama. The Kamar Hiachila Samadane Olam. Maybe it's not the Tanakama, it's the Tanakama back in the first paragraph, which describes how, Mida Keneged Mida. She gave him the delicacies of the world. In other words, this adulteress, she enticed this man, this adulterer. She gave him nice things to eat. Therefore, we give her the carbon of an animal. In other words, an animal, we give her barley because in Mida Keneged Mida, she gave him nice food. We're going to give him bad. We're going to give her lousy food. Amalei. So Malil said, that's fine if she gave him nice food. If she was a wealthy woman, she could afford it. Aniya Michael, what do you with a poor woman? You can have an adulteress who's poor too. The Torah doesn't differentiate between the economic status of the adulteress. I'll explain it to you. In other words, Ramliel was really going on Rav Meir. Rav Meir, who said in the Mishnah in the first paragraph, that Mida Keneged Mida, or the Tanakama, if it's not listed as Rav Meir, Mida Keneged Mida, she gave him nice food, so therefore we give her lousy food, right? We give her lousy food, and it doesn't list it there as right. In the Mishnah, it doesn't list it there. In the Mishnah back on Chesam and Beis, right? The Bryce expand that more. That would be Rav Meir. In any case, he said that she gave him nice food, so we give her bad food. That's fine. What about a poor lady who couldn't give her nice food? The answer is, what the part that applies to everybody is that she did a ma'aseh behema, so therefore her carbon is ma'aseh behema. I'll explain. That's why her carbon is brought from barley. So that's what he was retorting. He was retorting to Rav Meir. Then the Mishnah goes on. Hayomi. Now this Hayomi is going on the Kohen. The Kohen who now led her through the process, through the I don't know what you want to call it, through the bitter process. Let's call it the bitter process of the Sota. He would bring a vial, little jar of cheres, a cheap earthenware vial, jar. Put in a half a log of water, menakir from the kir in the base of mikdash. From Mishkan. Give her less, not even a chatzi log, half of that, a quarter of a log. Why? Because Shem Shemat Rav Meir is going to have later on that you write less. He reduces the amount of writing that goes on the document that's eventually put into the water and is blotted out. The letters come off in the water, just like he reduces the amount of ksavas. We'll see later Mishnah Kachmat Maim. So he also says less water. The Kohen comes into the Heichal. The turns to his right. There was a place in the Heichal which was which had Shem Amma. There was a tile there, Amma by an Amma, that was loose. It wasn't like cemented in like all the other tiles. The Tabla Shayish, it was a tablet or a tile of marble. The Bas it had a ring in it that was set in it, which was like a handle, that was set in it. When he would lift up that tile, the note and take some dirt from underneath there, that's in the base of Mikdash, the nosin, and he puts it into the water. You have to put in enough so it should be seen, not a little amount so that it'll just get absorbed into the water and you won't see it, but enough dirt that you could see it in the water. From the dirt that will be, we're going to look at those words carefully in a few minutes. Asher yiyah b'karka mishkan, that will be in the karka of the Mishkan. Yikach HaKohen, Kohen will take Manasseh and he puts it into the water. Elamayim, see, she says it's got to go, not the Satzan Bamayim that it could be absorbed, but Elamayim that you should be able to see it in the water. Tanapila Shacheres Chadash says it's got to be a new earthenware vessel, this jar, a new one, use a new one, not an old one, can't be previously used. My time of Rabbi Shmuel says reason Gomer Kli Mitzorah from Mitzorah. Here it says Kli. It says Kli here. Malahol and Cheres. Just like by Mitzorah, he has to take a Kli Cheres. Here also he takes a Kli Cheres. The pasuk reads V'lokach HaKohen Mayim Kadoshim B'Kli Cheres. Right, pasuk Yud Zayin in Perek Hey. Bamidbar. Okay, so he has to take it clear. So how do we know that it's a brand new one according to Rishmal? Because he learns out Kli Mitzorah, Malan Cheres Chadasha, Afkan Cheres. That's all. Here it's also Cheres, it's a new one. How do we know there? It's got to be. How do we know by Mitzorah it has to be a new one? You'll say V'Shachad Esat Sipor Ha'achas one of the two birds, Yeshech el Kli Cheres, into the Kli Cheres al Mayim Chayim. He shechted over the Kli Cheres on running like spring water. Ma Mayim Chayim, just like new running water, spring water. No work was ever done with it before. It's fresh water out of a spring. Same thing with Kli, no work has ever done with it. So by Mesorah, it's got to be a brand new one. And we learn Kli here also. So you might say, just like by Mesorah, it's got to be running spring water. Here should also be running spring water. Shouldn't be water that's already sitting in a mikvah. So the Gemara saying Hanami, Rabbi Shmuel Hachanami. Rabbi Shmuel learns it out from Metzora, and he learns out Kli. So just like by Metzora and Hachanami, that's got to be new water, spring water. Here also Hachanami. Damar Bechon is a three machlokes. Bechon is made kior. It can come from the kior, not spring water, water that was in the kior in the base. Rabbi Shmuel Amar Meimayin. No, it's got to come from a spring. Meimayin. So it can come anywhere, it can come from any mikveh, it can come anywhere. So this water that we're talking about that's used for the sota is a three machlokas. It doesn't come out of the kior, does it come from a mayan, or does it come from any water? Okay, but if you learn it from Mitzorah, from a Xer Shava, Malam Mitzorah Shekeiton, Eitz Era, Be'ezo, V'Shishlas, by in the case of Mitzorah, requires cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet yarn. All have to be part of that process. Remember, they're burned all together. So here also maybe you should need that by sota. Amarava, Amakra Bikli Cheres. So now he sort of changes it. It's not that it's exactly based on a Kli Xer Shava, even though Rabbi Shmuel says it is the same that you need a new Kli Cheres and it's got to be fresh water also, spring water. But he says it's not really the Xer Shava. It's simply because here it says Bikli Cheres. It says here V'lakach HaKohen by Sotas, V'lakach HaKohen Mayim Kedoshim Bikli Choras, right? Bikli Choras, Kli Shamati L'Chakvar. That's how you know that it's like Mitzorah, right? Because he says in Sota, put it in Bikli Choras. The Kli Choras, we're talking about a Kli Choras that we already talked about before. That's how you know it's a new one. It's not like Xer Shava that you have to compare everything that applies by one applies by the other, including Eitz Eres, Eitz of Shishalas. No, the reason that he learns that you need a new one is because it says the same Kli Cheres we talked about Mitzorah. Here it says Bik Kli Cheres. It doesn't say Kli Cheres. It says Bik Kli Cheres. Doesn't and it says Bik Kli Cheres. That is to show that it's got to be the Kli Cheres that was mentioned elsewhere. Hachimash Rashi, even where we are, says Hachimash L'Rabba Middle of Sivlakach Kli Cheres. Could have just said, take a Kli Cheres, take an earthenware vessel, but also my mind, put water there. He says, big Kli Cheres. It says in a way, big Kli Cheres, that's telling me it's the Kli Cheres that we're talking about by Mitzorah. So it's not exactly Xer Shava anymore. Amar Rava. So who says this idea that's got to be a new one? Rabbi Shmuel. We start off the Gemara, Tana Pili Cheres Chadash to Rabbi Shmuel, because he learns out either Xer Shava or we change it, not Xer Shava, but simply it says big Kli Cheres. What about the Chachamim who disagree? They say that it doesn't have to be a new one. Mishnah just says Hayomi Pili Shel Cheres. He just says he brought it. He brought an earthenware vessel. It doesn't say a new one. The Mishnah doesn't say a new one. Rabbi Shmuel says it's got to be a new one because he learns it out from Mitzorah one way or another. But the Chachamim say no, it could be an old one. But even according to Chachamim, Amar Rav is explaining now the Chachamim Loshon or Elishon is but that's only if it hasn't been blackened through a lot of use and over the fire, whatever. When some fun of it became dark, and that's already puzzled. My time, but the mind, it's got to be similar to water. My mind, the water is simple water. It hasn't changed, even if it's not spring water. It's not discolored now. Afkli also shlonshtanu. It's got to be in its original form. It can't be blackened. Boy, Rabbi asked this question: what happens if it was blackened? You put it back into the furnace and it became whitened again. You burn it long enough, it's called libun, right? Like we did with people who clean their hagala, they clean their kelim for Pesach with libun. If it was a fire, if either you did hagala in the water or if you did libun in the oven, whatever, you turned it white. So that's a way of you putting back in the furnace, like making it new again. So here, let's say it became blackened. Even according to Chum, according to Rabbi Shmuel, you need a new one. According to Chum, you can use an old one, but it can't be blackened. Whatever became blackened, and now you put it back in the furnace. When it's not and it became white again. Now, do you say keep in the itzit? Once it's been rejected, it's a puzzle, it's no good anymore. Once it's restored, it's restored. Tashma, Rabbi Lazar Omer, 8 Erev days of Shishlas. Let's say you had the eitz eres and the ezim shilchas, the ingredients that you need with a mitzorah. Shehivshul behen to pasal achar. What he did was he twisted them together, made them into a cord, to a rope, and used it to schlep his kalim on his back. And he was carrying a box or something on his back with this cord that he made out of the eitz eres and the eitz eres and ezim shilchas. It's psulim. They're puzzle, even though you can undo the cord and put them back to their original status. Well, awesome, Adri, over there you can take back, you can untie the cord, untie the rope, and smooth them out again. So you see that once it's puzzle, and you can't restore it. There's no hustle the iklik gufa there. It's impossible that if you took cedar wood and hyssop and yarn and you twisted them together and carried a pack on your back, it's impossible that some of the ingredients didn't peel off a little bit. Something it could have peeled off. It couldn't return its original state. Whereas over here, in the case of the kli cheres that was blackened, and you now whitened it by putting it in the furnace, and that furnace again, it's basically the same as it was before. You could restore it to its original state. So maybe over here would be good. Where it's not kosher the shiloh. Let's say when the Kohen takes the kli cheres now with the offer and the water, right? Where does he get the offer? No, first he only has the water, right? He puts the water in there from the kior, and now he comes into the heichal and he turns to his right. Where was the loose tile there, which he lifted up and took the dirt from and put that in there? Where was it? The tile was to the right when he came to the heichal. My timer. We learn called Pino Shatapona. We learn out from the Shnei Maser Boker of the Yam Shel Shlomo that it's always to the right. It says we always be going to the right. So whenever you turn to the right. Same way when the Kohen brings the chatos, the dama chatos. Remember, how does it? The dama chatos goes on. Remember, he sprinkles it on all four corners of the mizbeach. When he comes up the kevesh, he goes up on the sovev, and he goes where? Which way does he turn? He turns. Remember, he goes on the mizbeach. And he first goes to the right. He doesn't turn like left face, but he's facing the mizbeach, right? The whole way. This is the mizbeach, and when he comes up there, he goes to his right to the corner here. Then he goes this way. He's always facing the mizbeach. He doesn't have not walking on the side, but he's always going to his right. So eventually he goes left, right? But at first turn, because he has to go left, because he's got to circle his path. But his first turn is always to the right. So here too, you always set it up that when you come into some place, you go to the right. So that loose tile that they had there, which they picked up and took dirt from, was to the right. So this place, Pasuk says, it says what it takes from the offer that's there. Okay, what do you mean that's there? You could bring it in, so bring it in and make it in there. That's all. I think you can just take the dirt from outside the base of Mikdash and bring it in the Achlas. Hamalomer bekarka hamishkan. It says minafar shia bekarka mishkan. So that's what we're going to deal with right now. What does it mean? Minafar shia. This time it holds that the offer has to be on the karka of the Mishkan. It's got to be there. So that means you can't take the offer outside and just bring it in. Like you bring the water, you have the cup of the water, let's say the vial of the water, and then bring some offer from outside and put it right in there. No, it's got to be bekarka mishkan. It's going to be on the ground. Bekarka mishkan yachol. So let's say you lift up that tile and there's no loose dirt there. It's only hard dirt. Yachol yachol goes. Maybe you should dig with an axe and get some dirt out there. Tamalomer ashir. It's got to be there already, as if it's got to be ready. So what do? Okay, so. Yesham, if there's loose dirt under the tile there, so Yesham, Have, bring from that. Ein Sham, if there's no dirt there, Ten Sham, put some dirt there. Meaning, the dirt you can't bring dirt directly from outside the base of Mikdash and put that in the vial. It's got to be on the floor of the Mishkan there, on the floor of the Mishkan. Okay, but it's got to be there. It's got to Yashir. You can't start digging there. It's got to be ready there. So here's the deal. If there is dirt there, use that dirt, fine. If there is no dirt there, bring some loose dirt from outside, but put it on the ground under the tile before you take it. As you can't take the dirt directly from outside the base of Mikdash and put it in the cup. It's got to be on the ground under the tile. So if there's dirt there, fine, take it there. If there's no dirt there, bring some dirt, put it on the floor, and then take it from there. That's for the first Tana. Tanirach, another Brisa says, Mina Afer Sheiyah, from the dirt that's there, you could take it from outside and bring it in. You bring it in. There should be a comma there, like You could take them outside Ashia, it's there, it doesn't make a difference where it is. It says Bekarka Mishkan. What does that mean? Bekarka Mishkan, Isi ben Yudomer, Lahavi, Karka Shilo, go, no, the give on the Beis Lamed. Bekarka Mishkan is teaching me wherever the Mishkan is, whether it's the Karka of Shiloh, whether it's Novin given, or whether it's the Beis Lamed, that's the Beis Mikdash in Yerushalayim downtown, right? Whether it's any there, that means that's what the Karka Mishkan teaches me. Not that it's you got to pick it up from the Karka. You can bring it from outside. It's telling you that this whole process goes wherever the Beis Mikdash is. That's what Isi ben Yehuda says. Isi ben Menachem disagrees. Isi ben Menachem is the first Tana really that we had before, that it's be on the Karka. Beis Menachem says, Einasach, I don't need this lashon of a Karka Mishkan to tell me that the halacha that applies in the Mishkan, right? Because we're talking here about the Mishkan, right? It says, Sheri of a Karka Mishkan. I don't need the pasuk Sheri of a Karka Mishkan to teach me a special halacha that it applies wherever the Beis Mikdash is, not only in the Mishkan. I don't need that. Kal v'chomer. Ismail Menachem Omer, ain't it tzarich? I have a kavachom ma'abed tumakala. Marach tumakala. What's tumakala? Coming into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. Now, what do you mean tumakala? That's not a light, I think, but it means that there's no capital punishment for that. Here by Sota, there's capital punishment, right? We're killing her, right? We're killing her with this water. So it's done in the auspices of the authorities of the Kohen and the Beis Hamikdash, etc. But tumakala, which is coming into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. What's the punishment there? Chorus. Chorus isn't as bad as capital punishment by a court. There is no difference between if you came into the Mishkan in the Midbar or in the Beis Olam and the Beis Hamikdash. There is no difference. Rash brings down because by the case of the Para Duma, goes lo chalkas ben mikdash mishkan she'emer parshas Paradum. It says shnei psukim ki es mikdash shem timei es mishkan shem timei. Whether it's the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan, the same thing applies. So if you come into the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah, it's not a misas pesach chorus. There is no difference between the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. So the tumah seish chamur, which is chamer, which is really punishable by capital case, right? Whether it's she's a sota drinking the water or if it's a capital case of the Zayim and Asra, Bezin kills her, right? So Tumas Eish Chamur, which is more Chamer in general. Tumas Eish of adultery is more Chamer than Tumas Mikdash V'Kashav, because Tumas Mikdash V'Kashav is only Kares. Tumas Eish is Misas Bezin. So Kolshkin, there's no difference between the Mishkan and the Beis Mikdash. So I don't need a Kavach, I don't need the pasuk of Bekarka Mishkan to teach me there's no difference between the various between the Mishkan, wherever it was, and the Beis Hamikdash. Came out Tamlo Bekarka Mishkan. What does Bekarka Mishkan teach me? Shlo Yavi we talk about. So you can't bring it out of your box and put it right into the vial, into the cheres jar. It has to be first put on the Karka Mishkan. So what does that mean? It doesn't have to be dirt that is native to the Beis Hamikdash, to that ground. It could come out, if there's dirt there, fine. If there's no dirt, bring it inside. But it's got to be in the karka. You got to take it from the karka. You can't take it from directly from outside and put it into the box. There's a machlokas here between Isi Menachem, who says it's got to be on the ground. Isi Ben Yehuda says no, it doesn't have to be in the ground. You can take it from outside the Beis Hamikdash and put it in a jar, and that's good enough. Rashi goes through a whole arichas over here to tell us that Isi Ben Yehuda's drasha, what is the karka mishkan? Tell me there's no difference between Shiloh, no, given a Beis Olam. He says in Nov and given there was no sota because that was considered a bama, and they didn't bring karbanos there unless they were karbanos that had a kavuas man, and the sota doesn't have a kavuas man, so he takes out the girsa of Nov and given. And the Mishkan, obviously, it says by the Mishkan, the pasuk is Mishkan. The Chiddush is only on the Beis Hamikdash. That this applies whether it's in the Mishkan or in the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom of the page on the base says, "I'm going to say on the Sifri below Garsel Rabba Shiloh, no, given Beis Lam. The Shiloh Mishkanu below Tzarach. I don't need to be pasuk for that. The pasuk says Mishkan. We're talking about the Mishkan, the Karka Mishkan. The Ikar Akasif, the Novin Givan, a Mashkan Masotas. The Bama Havi, the Lavi Aron Elam. There was no Aron there. There was no Chavas Yachid. Shein Lo Zman Kavua. Here again, you see Rashi says Shchitas Kashim, and he's going to say it on tomorrow's daf about 10 lines down. Rashi, 12 lines down. Rashi is Shchitas Kul. Remember that Rashi always called. That's how you know it's the real Rashi. He always calls Masechtas Zvachim Shchitas Kashim, and he calls Chulin Shchitas Chulin. That's Rashi's lashon. All right, we'll pick up here tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem for me, Boilu, the 5th line where we're up to.